Good morning, guys. Welcome back to Connerty Meadows Farm. Do you have a pressure canner that maybe you're a little bit afraid to use? In today's video, I'm going to show you how I use Goldie here to make some nice chicken broth. I will show you step by step what we do, and I'll show you my other pressure canner. Yes, I have two, and I use them both very regularly. Pressure canning can be a bit daunting and a little bit scared if you don't have someone to show you the way. So let me hold your hand and we'll do this together. Let's start with what we're making. We had whole chicken the other day, about 3 days ago, and I have been boiling it on the stove ever since. So now it is time to strain it out. I just use basically a pasta strainer, and I'm going to strain it from one pot through the pasta strainer into the other pot. Because I don't care if a few little bits get through here and there, and I definitely want all the flavoring and spices to come through, which they usually do when I use this bigger strainer. And you can see I'm just trying to get every last bit of it out. And then that just makes it a little bit easier. I don't need it finely done. This will just be used for broth, for soups and whatnot anyway. So just quickly for pressure canning. So here in Canada we have Bernardin, which is basically the US version of Ball. But I will tell you, given the choice, when I'm pressure canning, I'd still far rather go for these old-fashioned jars. They're usually square, and the reason why is they're a little bit thicker. The glass is actually a little bit thicker than the more modern jars, even though these are considered the more expensive jars. We also have a knockoff brand of Bernardin, which is called Golden Harvest, and this is your Golden Harvest jar. They are virtually identical, just slightly different lettering and thing. My understanding is they're actually made in the same factory. But either way, regardless, when I am pressure canning something, I will always try to reach for these old ones first, just because I don't worry about them cracking as easily or having the bottoms come out of them as easily, and I'm a little more comfortable using them. So today we're going to be canning up in the pressure canner that chicken stock that has been cooking now for almost 3 days. I shut it off at night before I go to bed, and then in the morning it's still warm, so I turn it back on, and then it just simmers all day long, and we just top it up periodically. So we've been doing that for 3 days now. And now I'm gonna go ahead, we're gonna get our jars ready and a pressure canner ready, and we're gonna go ahead and pressure can it. It's one of the first things that we have to remember about canning our food is that we're going to follow a recipe from this book. This is one of my favorites, but it is not the only book I use. I have a number of canning books that I use. We are going to be using some flats, and we have our rings. And this down here is one of my two pressure canners. I call this one Goldie. And Goldie is a very old girl. Goldie here was actually made somewhere between 1971 and 1973. And she is made by Presto. Now, originally, Goldie came with a weight system that was a solid 15-pound weight system. Goldie was designed at the time for you to check her pressure via this little mechanism right here. Now here in Canada, we do not have an office or a place that you can take these in to get them checked like in the United States. In the United States, they have county offices that you can go into and you can get your pressure canner checked. We don't have that in Canada. But what we do use in place of that is a 3-weight. What do I mean by a 3-weight? So this is the rocker, and this particular one is called a 3-weight because you can actually take it apart so the rings come off. The rocker itself is 5 pounds, and each ring is also worth 5 pounds for a total of 15 pounds. Now you don't see me have the other ring on here because we don't need it at our elevation. We actually only need the rocker itself and the single ring. So that is what we use on Goldie. Now I also have a second pressure canner that is a new one, and I'll show you it. This is my other pressure canner, and I will not be pulling this one out of the box right now because I'm not going to use it today, but I'm just going to show you which one it is. Now I save a little bit of money by buying one without the gauge because, again, we don't need that here. So I'm able to save myself a little bit of money by buying one that just has the rocker on it. And this is the second canner I have. If I have a lot of canning to do, or I'm doing multiple rounds of canning, I can actually have one on the stove, one locked and ready to go, which means that as soon as this one is done canning, I can take it off to depressurize and put the next one directly on, which makes my canning, if I'm doing multiple rounds, especially when green beans are coming in, a lot faster. One of the big things that you need to remember when you're using a pressure canner is if you are putting a hot liquid, so hot broth, your canner needs to be hot. So that means that you're going to put your 3 liters of water in it if that's what your canner calls for, and both of mine do. When I'm using them, I need to put 3 liters of water in them. So I put my 3 liters of water in, then I put it on the burner, and I let that water warm up with the jars in it, and then I fill the jars and put them back in the canner. So hot liquid, hot jars, hot canner. Now, alternatively, I could be canning something from cool. So say I went ahead and I made my broth and I didn't have time to can it, and I just stuck my broth in my pot in the fridge for the night. Or maybe I put the broth in the jars and I put the jars in the fridge for the night. That would work as well. What then you would have to do is make sure you put cold water in your canner, put your cold jars in your canner, and then you would slowly heat your canner up. So cold jars, cold canner, hot jars, hot canner. In our recipe today, we are doing chicken stock. I will say I didn't add any of this. I just have the chicken and whatever spices that our whole chicken was cooked with. And then we're just going to pop on down here. I have had the stock cooking for a number of days now. So we're going to leave 1-inch headspace, and we are going to vent for 10 minutes. And then we are going to process for 25 minutes because we're using 1 liter jars. And then we'll go through, turn it off, let the pressure return to 0, and then open and vent. And I'm going to take you through all of those steps, but I just wanted to show you what it is here in the book. All right, let's get those jars filled up. Now, the wonderful thing about pressure canning, unlike water bath canning, is that you don't actually have to fully sterilize all your jars, because under pressure, they're going to be sterilized. They need to be clean. So I rinse them out with really hot water after I've washed them with soap and water. And that is good enough for the cleaning process. Always wipe your tops before you put your flats on. So I just use warm water on a napkin. And that's how I put my lids on and get ready for the next jar. And just go ahead and keep repeating this process until all of your jars are filled. Now, I know some people talk about using vinegar to break down the fats on the top of the jars, but vinegar has actually been proven to also break down the sealing compound. So I don't suggest you use vinegar, just hot water. The easiest way that I find to make sure that I get 3 liters into my pressure canner is I actually just go ahead and fill my jar 3 times and put it in the pressure canner. Now, our stock, I had to step out for a bit this afternoon, so I poured it off and it was warm, but now that I'm back, it's cooled down to just a little bit above room temperature. So I'm going to match the temperature of my water to about room temperature and pour it into my pressure canner. So my pressure canner asks for 3 quarts of water in the bottom of the canner, and I will always put 3 quarts in, but sometimes if I have something that requires longer than half an hour, I will add an extra half quart just to make sure that my canner does not run dry, which would not be good. Goldie here can fit 7 quarts, and so can my silver pressure canner, but I only have 5 quarts of stock, and that's okay. You could put 2 more jars in it, fill them with water, and then have an emergency supply of water, but I already have lots of that, so I'm not going to do that today. But just so you can see where the water line comes up to, go ahead and put our lid on and let's get ready. Goldie here can only be used on this back burner. Some of the burners have their BTU is too high, which means that it's too hot for your pot to go on. So this is the only burner on my stove that is recommended for pressure canning. So that's why I can never run my 2 pressure canners at the same time. I have to alternate them out. Anyway, Goldie's lid, in order to put her lid on properly, you can see we're not lined up here. I actually have to push down a little bit and spin it, and that's how it'll go into place. You can see here, this burner is actually the hottest one because it's a dual burner. This one is too small of a burner. This one up here is too big of a burner. That is the burner that back there that I can pressure can on. As you can see, I'm pressure canning on a propane or a gas stove. They both work very similar. I'm gonna go ahead and light it. And I tend to start out really slow. It's less likely of having any siphoning happening or having your jars going to shock or anything like that. So I started at about 4. When it comes up to temperature, I usually drop down to about 2, between 1 and 2 on mine. You're gonna have to play with yours and figure out where it works. But that's where mine is. So this is going to take a little bit of time, and I'll come back to you at the next step. So what are we looking for? So the first thing in pressure canning that we're looking for is we're going to slowly warm this up. And then what's going to happen is as this comes up temperature, this little spout back here, right here, is going to vent steam. And sometimes you can't see it. Sometimes you have to like look on the side. You'd have to look from this angle to see the steam coming out of this spout. And sometimes it's very fine. When that happens, I'm going to show you. But then once this starts to steam, we're going to turn the timer on for 10 minutes and we're going to let it vent for 10 minutes. And that's just making sure all the air comes out and it's starting to build up a smidge of pressure. After our 10 minutes is over, we're going to take our rocker, which is 10 pounds, and we will very carefully put it over the seam vent like this, and then we will wait for this to start rocking. After I put mine over the steam vent, I actually will turn mine down to where I know it needs to be at around that 2 and wait for it to start rocking. Then once it starts rocking, that's when you set your timer for, in our case, 25 minutes. I want you to listen closely and you'll hear that we are getting close. Once I start to hear the jars rattling around in here, that tells me that the water is starting to boil. So we're actually starting to get close to the point when we're gonna see steam. So now I have to pay quite a bit more attention. Now I know some of you watching this are probably first-time canners, and you're probably freaking out a little bit because you want to use your pressure canner, but you're pretty scared too because you've heard these horror stories about it blowing up. So first off, let me give you a little bit of something less to worry about. On the top of almost all canners now is this little thing here, this little one here, right here. That is a pressure release valve, which means that if the pressure in the canner gets too much and it deems it unsafe, it'll actually blow that out, and that will save the whole thing from blowing up on you. So it's just a safety feature for you. And just to think, in 1971, when this was made, they had that there. Most pressure canners nowadays will have a safety valve on them of some sort, so you don't have to worry as much. That being said, obviously you still need to take some care and follow the directions and the manual that come with your pressure canner. Now at this point, you guys can probably hear there's a lot of rattling going on in there, and the jars are really moving around. I expect very shortly we will start to see steam coming out this one back here. Now this is very hot now, so be careful you're not touching your pressure canner and you're not moving it. Did you guys see that? See that stream coming out? So now, what we are waiting for, you can see that it's coming and going. We want that steam to be steady before we set our timer, 10 minutes. So hang tight, pretty soon here, we'll set our timer. So one thing I am going to do, now that that has started to steam, is I'm actually gonna go ahead and I am gonna turn my heat down just a smidge. Remember, I end up somewhere between here and here. I can just hear my jars clanking around in there pretty good, and I don't want them to be clanking too much.
Now don't be alarmed that you are seeing some spitting of some water through this. That is perfectly normal at this stage.
Now that we have a nice steady stream, we are going to put the timer on for 10 minutes. All right, our timer went off. We've been venting for 10 minutes. Time to put this little guy on. You are going to want to add this weight very carefully because you do not want to get hurt. And did you see that little guy there pop up? So now our next step is I'm going to turn this down, and I usually sit right between here to get my rocker going. Sometimes I'll sit right on the 2 and then I'll turn it down a bit once my rocker starts. Now what we're waiting, this is our rocker, we're waiting for it to start to dance. Now surprisingly, this is actually still pretty good on mine, and you'll slowly start to see that this is gonna rise, and when it gets right around the 10 is when my rocker will start to go. You can already see it's starting to go up a bit.
It's not necessary to have one of these. Again, my other pressure canner doesn't have one and it works perfectly. And again, yes, we are kind of watching the gauge a little bit here, but I really have no idea if this gauge is actually accurate. From what I've seen, it is, but I am not relying on this gauge entirely.
You hear the ticking? It's starting to think about actually rocking. Not quite there yet. It is thinking about it. Go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this down just a smidge to where I need to sit for my whole rocking period. can see where my pressure is sitting. Again though, it doesn't matter if you have this or not. My other canner, I don't use it. And I don't even know if this one's right. Like I said, 1971 to 1973, who knows? So we're just relying on this. And now that we're rocking, we can get our rocker to maybe not rock so quickly by turning our temperature down, and we'll then turn our timer on. It is a little bit fast for the rocker to be going, but unfortunately in my particular stove, if I turn it down any more, even the smidgest amount, my rocker stops. So this is the lowest temperature I can go on my stove while maintaining a rock. If you go to the Presto website, they actually have a video of how your rocker should be going, so you can match up your rocker to theirs. For me, this is what I have to do. This is the lowest setting while maintaining my rocker. So I can set my timer to 25 minutes and I can actually go about and do some other things. I can hear the rocker while I'm working, so I don't have to be standing right next to the stove, but I do need to still be in the vicinity. Timer just went off. We're going to shut our temperature off, and we're actually going to pull that off the heat. Now this is going to take a little bit to cool down. You'll notice this will go down, then this will go down. As soon as this goes down, you can take this off. And then once you can take that off, you can slowly start working at opening the lid a little bit at a time before you take the jars out. This is going to take a while to cool off. So while this is cooling off, I'm going to pop outside for a minute and do some things and then come back in and check on it. Hey guys, editing Ricky here, and I just realized that while I was explaining about letting the canner cool off and I went outside, what I did forget to mention is in the depressurization period of the canner, you cannot speed this along. You cannot come back here and just yank the rocker off and try to push this along faster to depressurize. That's actually very, very dangerous. And if you want to blow stuff up or injure yourself, that is when it's going to happen. So you need to let this depressurize or cool down, as I call it in the video, naturally. You cannot rush this process. Sorry. So, on to the video again. All right, I just got in from outside. We are as close to 0 as my gauge gets, but again, gauge doesn't matter. This is down, so that means it's safe for me to go ahead and remove this. No steam is coming out, so I can take that off. And because I am at this point and I've taken this off, I now can go ahead and untwist the lid, and only untwist the lid, just to let a little more heat out. Now this is hot, so I have to push down as I turn on this particular one, and all I'm going to do is relieve the pressure on it like that. I'm going to wait 5 minutes before I do anything else. We've been sitting about 5 minutes, so now what we're going to do is we are going to take this up. We're going to be very careful. We're going to tilt it slightly to the side and just rest it there, opening it just a smidge, enough so more steam can go out. So the reason why we're doing this very slow is because if you do it really fast, you're more likely to have a lot of siphoning, and we're trying to avoid the siphoning. So we just do this in incremental stages and let it cool down slowly. Just another 5 minutes. You still see lots of steam coming out. Do not touch the pot. It is very hot. Oh, there was a pop in there already, which is not uncommon to hear when you're doing this at this stage. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the lid off, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take these jars out. And these jars are going to be placed in a location that they're not going to be bothered for 24 hours. Lifters, they have an oven mitt. I like to use the oven mitt so that I can get in there and support underneath and carry it. So you can hear the popping going on in here still. I'm going to take this over and put it on our table where it won't be disturbed. And you can see, due to going low and slow, we haven't had any siphoning. So here is our jars here. As you can see, I've been making pasta sauce and applesauce. So this, see that? The pressure up and down. This is why it's important to leave these guys alone for 24 hours as they sort themselves out. If you guys look closely, you can still see some of the bubbles come up and make the stuff move around in them. I promise it's not ghosties. That's just all of the heat and working under the pressure. And that's, again, why we're letting this sit undisturbed.
So having your jars seal and unseal at this point in the process is very normal. Just because they're sealing and unsealing and popping up and popping down, it's nothing to worry about. They will sort themselves out, I promise.
And as you can see, this is still extremely hot. So I'm just gonna put the lid gently on it, not tighten it down, push it to the back of the stove, and leave it there until tomorrow morning when this has cooled off. Then I can go ahead and wash it and store it. And you can see the lid isn't on all the way. It's just kind of sitting there, but that is really hot, so just don't touch it. And that's all we're gonna do for tonight. All right, guys, we're gonna see you back here in the morning, and we will check to make sure all of our broth has sealed, and then I'll show you where we store them. Right, guys, we are the next day, and our chicken broth has all sealed, all of them, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you where we put them. I do not store any of my jars with the rings on them. And the reason for that is if for whatever reason any of these come unsealed while in storage, it's much easier to tell. So you can see these are sealed pretty good, but that I never ever put anything in storage with the rings on. Lots of people do it different ways. I just like to because it makes it really easy to find any jars that haven't sealed. So come on with me and I'll show you where they will get to go. So this is my cellar. Hang on, let me turn a light on. This is my cellar. Thomas built this for me last year or the year before. Either way, there is a video of it and I'll link it for you. But this is where my stuff goes. And you'll see everything is labeled. This labeling that I use is just painter's tape. And I like it because it doesn't leave a sticky residue and it's easy to peel off. Now, it won't stick on your jars if your jars are dirty. So it's a really good reminder to wipe down all your jars before you put them in storage. And then this will stick and you can put the year and what it is. So I have to add my chicken broth in here, but you can see, so we have a few things in here. Some corn and apple juice and peaches and beans. Hot sauce up there, lots of pickles, tomato sauce, lots more tomato sauce. I have lard, salsas up there, applesauce up over there, lots and lots of tomato stuff. These are actually some of my favorite jars to use. These are ones that my mother grew up using, and they're the very old-fashioned jars with the glass lids. And this is apple juice in here from my steamer. Yeah, lots of different stuff in here. And then down on the bottom I have my potato bin, another potato bin, and I don't know if you can see there, but we have some pumpkins and some squash. This is not the only cellar that we have. This one is actually really small. You can kind of see it's great. It's I'm really super happy with this, but this is not the only long-term storage place that we have. We have 2 other places that I keep stuff, but this is where the broth goes. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us on the farm in the kitchen, and we'll see you next time.